Hello, hello, welcome everybody. I'm Jev. Yes, Triple V. The accent, by the way, is purely Kiwi. I read old stories for children, so we keep this a family-friendly channel by having bad word blockers, banning bots, and preventing spam. So that means new followers need to wait a few minutes before they can join in the chat. Since these stories are so old, they're now in the public domain, which means they are free to read for anyone and by anyone, the way many Christmas songs are. The digital versions I read are from Project Gutenberg, and you'll find the link for that below. The physical ones are just old books my family has lying around. Sometimes I'll even show them to you. These, by the way, are live reads. Think of them as bedtime stories rather than actual audiobooks. You get the benefits of my mistakes, distractions, explanations, and terrible attempts at accents, along with plenty of chat and interruptions as we find out about things in the story. If you need to do work or chores, then that's fine. Just come and lurk. Please adjust your volume to suit. There are captions available if you have to be quiet or you have hearing challenges, but be warned, sometimes the captions aren't always that accurate. I am a member of the Codex, an awesome group of reading streamers on Twitch. People from many walks of life who share their love of reading, and you'll find links to the Codex reading team and our Discord server below. A special feature of the Codex Discord is the security channel for those of you who stream or moderate. You'll find lots of practical, useful information to help keep your stream and your community safe. So, hang around and come discover adventure with me. You never know what we'll find. Right, testing this to see if it's going to work, and yay, it is. Sorry, I had a video call overseas that took longer than I was expecting, but it was a really, really good, productive, worthwhile call. So, not quite so set up as I usually am. And how are you? Welcome. Glad you're here. I hope you're doing well. We are going to be continuing The Secret of the Old Clock by Carolyn Keene. It's the first Nancy Drew book that was ever published. What else? I'm doing okay. Oh yes. Thank you for posting those, Void. That's really appreciated. And also, if you are looking for a copy of this book here, yeah, Void's testing out the different things. I think oh no, good, that does work for you. Thank you so much. Yeah, some things do actually take a little bit longer when you have to deal with them in a hurry. And then also, if you've been on a video call for several hours, you might need to go and relieve yourself before you get on camera again. So thank you for that, Void Android. That is really, really appreciated. I am just going to open up my drink, keeping it below the line of sight because I don't even have a sleeve on it today. Codex is the group of readers that I am part of. It is our stream team. If you read public domain books on Twitch, please come and join us. You might even be able to be part of the team. It's wonderful. I don't know if the Discord one will work for you, but it will work for me. Sorry, Void. Oh, yep, no, there's Wayward Bard lurking. That's awesome. Thank you for being here. I do appreciate that. Waiting for the Discord one. Yeah, I think the Discord one is only moderators and me that can actually post that one. Just because we did go through a stage when trolls would come around that, yeah, was not so great. They would do things like spamming links and things like that. So we have a whole lot of things set up in place. If you have not been here before, we're pretty tough on bots, including view botting. I would rather have less viewers that are actual real viewers. I would rather have real viewers and have less viewers than have lots of numbers of non-genuine viewers where they're just bots, because I don't get paid per view. I get paid by Twitch per ad play for the number of active viewers. So if you are watching more than 2 streams, your views will not count. You will not be actually providing financial support to whoever it is you're watching that way, unfortunately. That's just the way it works. Other things, we have word bans in place and a whole lot of things like that, just to keep the space a safe space for everybody. So if you say something and it doesn't get through in chat, it's not that someone's having a go at you, it just randomly, yes, Voidy is the only okay bot here today, apart from AltJev. AltJev's allowed to be here, which is actually a disguised version of Stream Elements and a couple of other things like that. But of the actual involved with chat and active, Voidy is allowed to be here, because we know Voidy and Voidy gets involved, and that's really, really appreciated. The 8 Ball says, "Cheer, bro," which means awesome, yes. It's a very Kiwi saying, "Cheer, bro." It's kind of like saying choice or, yeah, cool, that sort of thing. Wayward says they are at work, audio is muted, but wanted to look for the homies. Yeah, no, I do appreciate you being here, Wayward. Not a problem. I do totally understand it. Void loves Jev 65%. Oh, that's cute. That's cute. I don't know if we've actually ever used those before. I know that they were set up in chat, and Goriki is affirming me and saying I'm a wondrous unicorn. Somewhere I've got unicorn. Oh yes, they're there. Just checking that the unicorn headbands are available. And Goriki is also affirming Void Android, and Void is a brilliant box of chocolates. That is a good thing to be, I think. So there we go. Let's have a tips video before we go further. So the tips are ways to make the most of your time here. And if you're a creative person and would like to contribute your own tips video, there are 5 or 6 tips. Anyway, just watch it, take notes of what the sequence is if you want to do your own one. And then, yeah, cool. But it needs to follow the information.
Hello, and welcome to the stream. I'm Jev. Now, let's talk about our 6 things to enjoy the stream. Number 1, get your drink. It can be water, whatever you like, but, take care of yourself and hydrate. Number 2, when I hydrate, you should as well. Did you hydrate just now? Number 2, get snacks or maybe a whole meal. It depends on your time of day and your own habits. Again, take care of yourself. Be hydrated and eat what you need to eat. Number 4, get comfy, whether it's cooler or warmer, just something to cuddle perhaps. But be comfortable. That's also important. It's good physically and mentally. Number 5, have something to write with and write on. It can be paper, it can be anything you like. Memo, post-it notes, whatever you like. This advert not associated with post-it notes in any way, shape, or form. Disclaimer. Now, sit back, listen, and enjoy. Feel free to engage in chat. Do the puzzle over here or, down there somewhere. Play Jev Bingo. I do silly things like, I do silly things. Or you can spend pages and make me wear silly things like funny ears, like this one. Have a good stream.
And welcome back. Yeah, sorry about that audio jump scare. I hadn't realized it was going to come out so loud because, and I wasn't actually seeing the audio meter because since the last time I was on camera, I've done an OBS update, which means that the width of some of the panels that I have actually defaults back to what they ordinarily are, not what I had them preset as. Actually, if I now go and lock my docs again, that probably won't happen. If you need to rearrange, OBS talk, technical talk here, if you need to rearrange things in your OBS layout, you can. It's pick something up, drag it to where you want to, it'll highlight the area it's going to go into, and then you can let it go, which is cool. But it won't work at all if you have docs, lock docs turned on. So docs being the menu up on the top. Then you can, if you uncheck that, and then you can move things around. So what I do is underneath my chat, I have over on the right hand side of my screen, I have my chat panel. So it's up where I can see it when I'm talking to you guys, and just below it I have the far right is the controls, which is starting and stopping streaming, starting and stopping recording, that sort of thing. There's a little section there, and then next to that is the scene transitions. Now OBS wants to make that a little bit wider, and then with everything else I've got stacked down the bottom, there's not necessarily enough room for everything. Because most of the time I'm on this big chat screen, then what I do is I actually have my video panel section, video play section, actually a bit bigger than a lot of people do, just because I need to stay aware of what's going on my screen and stuff like that. So I don't actually have my audios in the horizontal layout with the bars moving up and down that way. I actually have them vertically, so they're moving up and down that way. If I had them this way, there wouldn't be enough room for everything to fit in. I would have to then scroll. If I have them vertically, most of the time, if the panels over on the far right are in the right place for me, then when I have a video running, it pops in, it puts in that sound meter and I can see it. But when those panels, the docs over on that bottom right hand corner, their natural width, it gets hidden, so I didn't see it initially, but we do now. And the reason I talk about all this, one is technical information that those of you who are streamers may not be aware of, because some people do know and some people don't know, and some people knew, but because they haven't had to do anything with it for a while, they've forgotten. They've become unaware of it. And if you are a viewer rather than a streamer, sometimes I think it's a good idea to actually understand not the details of what's going on, but to realize the work that people put in to be able to entertain you. Gonna have to check mine tomorrow, says Void. When you do it like that, can you also resize it better too? I can resize the width of it, so I can have it, if I squish up other things further across, I can fit in more of the, if I have a bunch of different level meters, audio meters in that section, because I've got different audio sources when they are live. If they are invisible in your source thing, they won't show there. So at the moment I've only got 3 showing, and then there's an empty patch at the end. But when I run a tip video or anything else that uses an audio that comes through, it will pop up one in there. And it just means that I have enough space there that it's going to show. I have the rest of that layout down below wide enough so that I can see the information I need, because my labels for my scenes are all fairly short. And one of the things I have been doing along the way is I am renaming what some of them are, so that they have like a letter code at the beginning of them, such as GIFs will have a G with a hyphen before what the GIF folder is, the GIF scene is about. And then I nest those into the scene that I actually want them in. Sorry about that. I won't go back over that. If you do want to catch that, just have a quick look at the timestamp now, and then you can just review that little bit of information if there was anything there that you thought that you wanted to do. So in my scenes, I have them listed. Some things are listed with a letter code at the beginning, like G for GIFs. I have a whole lot of different areas where GIFs show up on scene, on screen at different times, and so they are nested in from those scenes into the scene that I'm currently in. So when you see the little animation for the book that comes up on screen when someone redeems, that has come from somewhere. But when treats are given to the cat and there's a redeem for that, we usually have one of a selection of gifts that will show up. They're all, I think the treats ones are all Pusheen ones, pushing the cat. And so I actually have the selection of them as set up within a little scene, and then I nest that scene into this scene that we're in, which is I call chat, for reading. And so there's things like that, makes it easier to find. But I have it so that the actual names for the scenes are not too long, so the panel that they're in, the doc that they're in, doesn't have to be really wide. I don't need to have a really long set of words to explain it, because I know what it is. GIFs old, GIFs treat, G old, G treats, G hydrate, G stretch, G water, G headwear. I think headwear is the longest of them, because I don't need to know any more than that of what it is. I don't need to give details. And then I can actually nest those into my actual scene that I'm in, which is my current chat scene. And it shows as a little wee list icon. And the sources often will have slightly longer name bars, but they don't necessarily, just because the way I named them at the time. But I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 across the bottom of my OBS. So I have Twitch stats, which will show me how many viewers I've got, how long I've been live, only in minutes. Overall, how many clips have been created in the stream, how many views I have had on something. I don't quite know how that one works. How many followers I've currently got, and how many subscribers. That's the Twitch stats. That's an extra doc that I've added in because it's information that I didn't want to have over in my browser, because my browser takes bigger resources. I'm just wondering, where's Ears to You? It hasn't done anything. Oh, Ears to You is one where you get to choose it, I think. As opposed to... Why are they not showing? Did any of those show? I thought I had... Have I got redeems turned off? No, I haven't got them turned off. They should be working. Did any of those work? Anyway, yeah, the old You Kids Get Off My Lawn is meant to show a GIF of Betty White or one of the other Golden Girls toasting somebody because, she's an old lady and she thinks it makes no difference whatsoever to the fun she's going to have in life. So, yeah. Ears to You is meant to be a redeem for a headband where you get to choose it. You get to choose it. So, yeah, I've got Twitch stats, Twitch activity feed, which tells me when there's been redeems and followers and things like that. Scenes is the list of the different things that I can go to. So when I'm playing a game, I click down there to my game scene. That's a pain. Why did that not show up? I wonder if that's because StreamerBot wants to do an update. I refunded you, by the way. I only saw what looked like a placeholder for the gifts. Okay. So folks, save all your pages today. We won't do any redeems. Oh yeah, the Sparkly Book one. Yeah, that's the one that shows that someone is redeeming something. Sparkly for the magic, because books are magic. So just a wee tip, folks. Don't do any redeems today just because they don't seem to be working. It's probably, like I say, because I need to update StreamerBot and there's something else that probably needs reconnecting. I'm not sure what. Oh yeah, did you know sometimes you have to check that your Stream Elements is actually still connected to your Twitch account? It's just one of those things. Down the bottom here, sources, that's the list of everything that's in this scene. So the chat is actually handled over in the Stream Elements overlay, as is this bit where it says story time. But this bit here that says the details of the book, or if I'm playing a game, I'll put the name of the game. That there is one of my sources. The book cover also comes from Stream Elements overlay because I've got that set up that way. I think Codex is. So Shame is here. That's in my sources. The things that can't pop up on screen are in my sources. There's a whole lot of like this. My Throne wish list link and my coffee link. Those are in my sources. I actually have those available. So if you are finding that your computer is getting overloaded, one of the ways of reducing that is put as much of those little bits and pieces into your actual if you use it, Stream Elements overlay design, because then it's handled through the internet side of it, and then it just sends the one signal that comes through. There's a ever so slight lag. Testing bot commands, yeah. There's an ever so slight, to me, that feels like there's an ever so slight lag because the signal has to go from wherever anybody is to Stream Elements and then get sent to my computer, because it then is processed through my computer to come out as the stream, and all that sort of stuff. There was something else I was going to say about that. So, and then I've got captions. Oh, that was sources. Captions, which, yeah, captions, we know all about that. But most of the problem with captions is actually my accent. Google captioning is surprisingly accurate for most people, but because my particular accent, to me, I don't have an accent because everybody feels like that. They're inside their own head. They're used to their own voice. But to other people, I sound very Kiwi. But on top of that, to Kiwis, I don't sound very Kiwi, and I don't hear that. I'm not aware of that. And so because of that, it's usually vowel sounds that are the problem when it comes to captioning. And this is why we've had a lot of fun trying out different languages for the Google captioning. Now, there are other versions I could use that would then feed into my setup here on OBS. The problem is that most of those require me to have Chrome browser open all the time that I'm streaming. And I happen to know from past experience that Chrome browser actually chews up more of my processing capacity on my computer than Opera does. And Opera is not particularly slim when it comes to processing. I am using there's an extension that Opera has, which is available for streamers. It's available for anyone to use, but it's only useful for streamers, where you actually have a particular iteration of the browser where when you open it up, any tabs that you already have open are already muted. So you're not getting those as sources that come through. And it also has, as the Opera GX is the one I use, Opera GX also has a little wee control mechanism where you can actually tell it that the browser is not allowed to use too much of your CPU and not allowed to use too much of your GPU. You can set caps on those. So if you're running an old potato, you can actually still do it and it will work. But that does mean that things like captioners that are handled solely through Chrome are not going to be options that are open to me. Most of those Chrome-based caption systems, even though they work wonderfully well, actually still use the same core Google captioning system, Google speech-to-text captioning system as what this is, even though some of those other ones appear to be more accurate. It doesn't make sense. There is no logic to that in my brain. They're all using the same core system. Why is it not working? But I have experimented with, I think I've gone through the whole list of English options for captioning. I will read you the list. It's hilarious. So, English. These are the versions of English that can be used with Google Captions here in OBS. Australia, Canada, Ghana, United Kingdom, India, Ireland, Kenya, New Zealand, Nigeria, Philippines, Singapore, South Africa, Tanzania. They're quite specific. I have not yet found one that actually hears me as what I'm actually saying. I don't know why. It just is that way. One of the mysteries of the universe. So next to captions, I also have my audio mixer, and then I have scene transitions, which just means instead of going, I'm on this scene and then bang, hard change, we're on the next scene, it actually controls how long it takes to do that and the style of it. On my one, I don't even see it anymore. It's called Lumia Wipe, and what it does is it's kind of like a cloud fades in out between the two different versions of it. You can do some really cool stuff with scene transitions, and you can actually do it so that you have specific transitions that work between specific scenes if you want to. It's really cool. And then the control panel. So that's that part of it. And yes, it does give me enough room on my audio mixer. I still prefer to have my audio mixer vertical, and I will blame that on being a sound technician. I was a sound technician for years for two different bands. I was assistant sound technician actually for those. And no, one of them I was the primary. And also for church for many, many years. Probably, how old am I now? Probably for 40 years. All part-time, you know, just sort of volunteer stuff. But there are certain things you get used to. So you get used to looking at a sound desk and having sound meters on the sound desk. And all of them are vertical, which is why for someone like me coming to OBS and they're automatically all horizontal, it's like, my eye is twitching. This is very strange. Yes, we will get to streaming very, very soon, folks. Don't panic. Just try and get that so I can see it. And I'm going to ignore StreamerBot in the background at the moment. Like I say, don't bother with any specific redeems at the moment, unfortunately. So that means no headbands, boo-hoo. But I will get that sorted before next time. I am doing very well. My current kidney stone episode seems to have calmed down a bit, hence me being on camera and talking flat out. Yeah, that's all it was. The last two streams that we had that were ducks, I wasn't able to be on camera or in front of the microphone just because I didn't know when I was going to get stabbed in the back by a kidney stone. It's not nice. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Apparently the only one that's worse is a gallstone. And I don't think I've got that, but I do have a bit of tenderness over in the area where that would be from, which my, not hypochondriac, thinking everything through in lots of detail brain, let's put it that way, wants me to check that it isn't to do with my gallbladder and also isn't an issue with my liver. From what I've seen, it's most likely just that because my kidneys were irritated by this kidney stone being a literal pain, that they sort of not went out on strike, but were giving pain indications and sympathy, and that's apparently a very normal thing to have happen. Not very nice. So yeah, making sure I'm getting lots of fiber and lots of extra water. I drink heaps of water. I usually drink 3 to 4 liters of water a day. So yeah, and straight water. I don't have lots of juice. I don't have lots of, I mean, I have my 3 coffees a day and that's it. I don't have anything more than that. I don't usually drink fizzy drink at all. The only time I do, you guys see me drinking it. I don't tend to drink a lot of alcohol. If anything, it will be a small glass of wine with a meal. And that's only sort of like once a month, once every 6 weeks if we happen to have any wine. I mean, it might be condensed down into a week to finish a bottle between me and the others in the household that drink it. But that's not a lot of wine, really. So it's not too much stress on my liver from that respect. And also anything else like gin or vodka or any of those other sorts of drinks. I'm looking down there just because I happen to know where the empty bottles are usually kept. Only because they are nice bottles, okay? So that's a nice gin bottle. This reminds me of a lot of things that would be suitable for Victorian apothecaries and things like that. So therefore, it is a nice bottle that is being retained for now. So yeah. So those other sorts of drinks, it would be like 1 every 2 or 3 days at the closest, usually maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, if I remember I've got anything. That's how it works. I don't tend to drink a lot. I don't like the feeling of having drunk a lot. And the results afterwards are definitely not nice. So therefore, I don't. So my organs should be actually reasonably happy when it comes to that sort of stuff. The nearest I've got to anything else that would cause issues is the fact that maybe my diet is slightly fattier than it should be. But it's all healthy fats, as far as I know. So I'm old. That's the problem. Just blame it on me being old, because apparently your body packs it up when you start to get old. I'm over 60. That counts as old now, doesn't it? I'm not getting a pension yet. I've got to wait a few too many years for that. Well, not too many, but whatever. So let's get on with reading this Nancy Drew and stop worrying about all that other sort of stuff. So I should be okay. If you see me grimacing, it may be that something's slightly uncomfortable, because usually I found it takes about a week after I've had an intense batch of pain from a kidney stone for everything to settle down and go, okay, we're not braced for it anymore. We're okay now. Your body gets sensitized to the pain and it starts overreacting too easily. So let's carry on with this. We're going to get started on the next section of Nancy Drew, which is, what's the chapter called? Let's have a look. An exciting discovery. That's right, I left you with that 3 streams ago, at the end of the 3rd stream ago. Right. Nancy Drew, this is chapter 14, by the way. Nancy Drew, why are you packing that suitcase? You're not leaving camp already. Oh, that's right, she was at the girls' camp because she wanted to go and see if she could find something at the Bad Family's place, but couldn't see a way to do so, I think. Nancy Drew, why are you packing that suitcase? You're not leaving camp already. Helen Corning, entering the cabin which she shared with Nancy, stopped in the doorway and stared in amazement at her chum, who was folding wearing apparel carefully into her suitcase. Wearing apparel. What other sort of apparel is there? Apparel is stuff that you wear. Asked I checked. I'm afraid I must leave this afternoon, Nancy admitted regretfully. But you've only been here 3 days, Helen protested. Don't you like the camp? Oh, I've had a wonderful time, Nancy cried impulsively, and the girls have been so nice to me. I'd love to stay, but I can't. There's something important I must attend to at once. Can't it wait? I'm afraid not. I've waited too long already. But the dance, Nancy, you don't want to miss it. I don't want to, Helen, but I really must go this afternoon. I can't understand what's made you change your mind so suddenly. It wasn't that horrid experience in the launch, was it? Nancy Drew laughed and shook her head. She could not tell Helen her real reason for departing, So long as she remained at camp, she knew that Helen and her friends would not leave her alone for a minute. It would be impossible to visit the Topham bungalow on the opposite side of the lake without offering explanations, and Nancy was unwilling to disclose the purpose of her trip. That's what it was about. In spite of Helen's teasing, she remained firm in her decision to leave camp. Directly after luncheon, she slung her suitcase into the roadster and took leave of the girls. Regretfully, they watched her go. Now, if only I can find my way to the Topham bungalow, Nancy thought. Just go and ask at the corner store. They'll know exactly where it is. Or anyone who lives locally and works locally. They'll know. The previous day, she had casually inquired from Helen which road led to the Topham bungalow, but the directions had been rather hazy. Coming to a fork, she selected the left-hand road, which appeared to circle the lake. As Helen had indicated, it was winding and narrow and richly sprinkled with sharp rocks. She's going to get a puncture, isn't she? From camp, it was comparatively easy to reach the Topham bungalow by launch, but the distance around the lake was nearly 8 miles. Nancy was forced to drive slowly, and had she met another car, it would have been difficult to have passed. So it's a single-lane road or track. In places, the road was muddy, for overhanging trees and bushes protected the moist earth from the rays of the sun. The going was especially hard because of 2 deep ruts, which apparently had been made by a heavy truck. I wonder what a truck was doing up this road, Nancy mused somewhat curiously. The tracks appear to have been made today, too. Oh, is this a little bit of foreshadowing? As she drove along, she noticed a number of summer cottages, but as the season was late, nearly all were boarded up. At last she came within sight of a clearing, and through the trees caught a glimpse of the Topham bungalow. I hope I'll find the caretaker, she thought. I'd certainly hate to go back without seeing him. Not without a feeling of anxiety, she stopped the roadster at the edge of the road. To her surprise, she observed that the tracks made by the truck did not continue further, so the truck has gone in to the Topham bungalow. Apparently the truck had turned in toward the bungalow. Nancy hurried up the path. As she emerged from among the trees, she stopped short and stared ahead in amazement. The entire camp was in disorder. The front door of the bungalow had been flung wide open, and the side doors were likewise ajar. An overturned chair had been dropped carelessly on the porch, and a trail of knickknacks stretched from the house to the path. The grass had been trampled, and there were peculiar marks in the soft earth. There's something strange about this. Yes, definitely, Nancy murmured. Quickly she bent down to examine the marks, which were clearly visible. At a glance she saw that the footprints had been caused by heavy boots, and there were long lines evidently caused by dragging boxes and furniture across the lawn. I think I'm beginning to see the light, Nancy told herself. Now I know what that truck was doing on this road. Unquestionably, it was a moving van, and it came here. Again she examined the imprints in the soft earth. These marks couldn't have been made more than an hour ago at the latest, she decided. As she hurried on up the path, it appeared to Nancy that the camp was deserted. There was no sign of Jeff Tucker, the caretaker in whose care the bungalow had been entrusted. Reaching the veranda, Nancy knocked loudly on the door. When there was no response, she boldly entered. What can this mean? She asked herself in dismay as she stared at the sight before her. The living room was in confusion. Save for a few pieces, it was bare of furniture. So what's all the confusion then? Even the draperies and curtains had been ripped from their rods. The rugs were missing, as was everything else of value. To Nancy's astonishment, she found that with the exception of one room, the entire house had been ransacked. Only one bedroom had been left practically untouched, and as she stepped into it, she noticed that the rug had been rolled up and securely tied as though in preparation for moving. As Nancy glanced at the disorder about her, she searched in her mind for an explanation. What could it mean? It looks like a case of ordinary robbery to me, she reasoned. Nancy had frequently read of cases where the summer homes of wealthy persons had been stripped of furniture and rugs by unscrupulous robbers who sold the valuables to second-hand dealers and fencers. So a fence is someone who sells on something that has been stolen. So we hear of that to do with jewellery and artwork. Sorry, I'm just trying to put my sleeve over my coffee so I can pick it up when I want it without showing off things that are not sponsored, without showing branding that hasn't sponsored me. There we go. And now I just need to put a bit of tape underneath it. I'll do that while I'm reading. So Nancy had frequently read of cases where the summer homes of wealthy persons had been stripped of furniture and rugs. I don't know why rugs is kept as a separate item there, by unscrupulous robbers who sold the valuables to second-hand dealers and fencers. In recent years, there had been a number of thefts in the vicinity of Moon Lake. Ooh, interesting. And as a protective measure, many of the cottage owners employed caretakers the year round, which is okay as long as the caretakers are trustworthy. Because, I mean, yeah, if you're a house thief, household goods thief, and you can get a job as a caretaker, you won't get a lot of jobs as a caretaker if you were there, unless you can find some way of having them believe that you were not involved. What had come of Jeff Tucker, the coloured man who'd been left in charge of the Topham bungalow? The place seemed deserted. Is this the room that he gets to use, or is he in a separate, like a worker's shed or something like that, as his living space? I don't know. We'll find out soon. Sorry, just moving things around because it's bugging me. And putting away my sellotape. Nancy realised that the Topham bungalow, which had been expensively furnished, would offer a rich prize for thieves. Now, as she viewed the evidence, a suspicion which lurked in her mind developed into firm conviction. She was certain that robbers had ransacked the place, carrying off nearly everything of value. They must have taken the Crowley clock too, Nancy told herself with a sinking heart. If they have, I'll never set eyes on it. A feeling of desperation came over the girl as she realised that again she had been thwarted. It seemed almost as though a cruel fate had ordained that the mystery of the missing Crowley will should remain forever unsolved. Poor Nancy. It's horrible to have yourself thwarted like that. It's barely possible the robbers overlooked the clock, Nancy thought hopefully. Depends on how old-fashioned it looked. Sometimes that people think something just looks old and manky instead of being actually vintage or antique old. She began to look about in nooks and corners of the bungalow. She opened closets and poked about in drawers, but her search was in vain. She found no clock. As Nancy returned to the bedroom, she regarded it meditatively. Why had the robbers left this one room practically untouched? Certainly the furniture was as valuable as that which they had taken. Unquestionably, the thieves had intended to strip the room, for they had rolled up the rug. I wonder if they heard me coming and were frightened away. Well, if they had, where did the truck go? You didn't have to get out of the way of a truck and to get close enough for them to hear you, for them to run away. Logic missing, broken. I didn't see a sign of their truck, and yet I'm sure they couldn't have left here many minutes before I arrived. As the thought occurred to her, she glanced uneasily over her shoulder. She realised that she was buried in a wilderness some miles from the nearest house, and the knowledge that unscrupulous men were in the vicinity was anything but reassuring. What if those robbers should still be around? She flashed through her mind. As Nancy Drew listened tensely, the very silence of the empty house was startling. A strange feeling came over her. She could almost sense that someone was watching her every move. Chapter 15. A desperate situation. How silly of me to be afraid, Nancy Drew laughed nervously. when you're talking to or about someone, do you keep using their surname and their first name? Tell me honestly in chat when you're ready, please. I'm trying to think of an example I can use that's appropriate. John Smith. John Smith is your main character in your book, and you're talking about him all the time. You refer to John, or you refer to Mr. Smith, or he, or anything else like that along the way. But you don't call him John Smith more times than you call him John, because we already know the book is about John Smith, or in this case, Nancy Drew. It's really weird. I don't get it. Maybe they're just trying to reinforce the series name because it's Nancy Drew books. I don't get it. I don't understand their thinking. Let's carry on. There probably isn't a person within miles of here, after she laughed nervously. As she glanced about the bungalow, it was with relief that she assured herself the place was deserted, yet for some reason she was unable to free herself entirely from the feeling that an unseen danger lurked in wait for her. The very walls seemed to smirk and grimace at her, and there was an ominous something in the air. I do remember this about the Nancy Drew books. The amount of narrated foreshadowing was pretty overwhelming, because they were telling you this is how these stories work. Now you need to get nervous for her. Now you need to wonder about what's going on and pay attention. All that sort of stuff. Now that Nancy felt certain that the Crowley clock had been stolen, she was anxious to get away from the Topham bungalow as quickly as possible. I'll drive to the nearest town and report the robbery to the police, she decided. Those men won't be able to travel very fast with a heavy moving van. There's a chance that they may be caught yet. Having made the decision, Nancy moved toward the front door. Passing a window, she chanced to glance out, and what she saw caused her to pause in sheer fright. A heavy-set man with a cap pulled low over his eyes was coming up the path toward the house. For a moment, Nancy Drew was held in a paralysis of fear. She was positive that the man who was coming toward her was one of the members of the robber band. Only an instant did the girl hesitate. Then she turned and ran back into the bedroom. Too late, she saw that she had trapped herself, for this room had no outside door. Nancy started back toward the living room, but before she had taken half a dozen steps, she realized that her escape had been cut off from that direction. The man had reached the veranda steps. Frantically, she glanced about for a hiding place. The bedroom closet offered the only possible refuge, and with scarcely an instant's hesitation, she stepped into it and closed the door behind her. Obviously quietly. Nancy was not a minute too soon. Scarcely had she shut the door when she heard the heavy tread of a man's hobnail shoes on the floor. Hobnail. Let's see if this is going to work, because I think this is through Stream Elements, not Streamerbot. Word. Hobnail. A short nail with a thick head, typically used in boot soles. They provided kind of like grip, and they didn't wear out too quickly. Work boots to fit with hobnails. Sorry, my eye is suddenly a little bit itchy. Let's carry on. Scarcely had she shut the door when she heard the heavy tread of a man's hobnail shoes on the floor. Peeping cautiously out through a tiny crack in the door, she saw a rough-looking man come into the bedroom. His face was cold and cruel. As he turned toward the closet where she huddled, Nancy Drew held her breath, scarcely daring to breathe naturally lest her presence be detected. Apparently the man noticed nothing amiss, for his eyes rested only casually on the closet door. Nancy's hiding place was anything but comfortable. It was dark and musty, and old clothing hung from the nails. As dust assailed her nostrils, she held a handkerchief to her face, lest she sneeze. If I sneeze, they'll be sure to find me, she told herself. They'll know well enough it isn't an animal, even a cat. She felt around and once came close to catching her hand on a sharp nail. Then she felt something soft on a shelf and imagined it was a sleeping cat. She drew back, then felt more cautiously. If she had to open the door to get in there, it's probably not a cat, unless it's a dead one. Then she felt more cautiously. Only an old fur cap, she told herself in disgust, and probably full of moths. Gracious, now I feel like sneezing worse than ever. She held her hand over her mouth hard and waited in agony, but presently the desire to sneeze passed, and Nancy breathed more fiercely. Then, when she dared peep out through the crack a second time, she saw that 2 other men had come into the room. Her ears have stopped working when she's covering her nose to stop herself sneezing. She should have heard them come in, unless they were being extra sneaky. From their appearance, she knew that they must be members of the robber gang. The first man seemed to be their leader, for he proceeded to issue orders. "Get a move on," he growled. "We haven't got all day unless we want to be caught. Take that dresser out of here first." The 2 men lifted the heavy piece of furniture and started with it to the door, but they did not move swiftly enough to satisfy their leader, and he berated them savagely. "If you were in such a hurry, why didn't you back the van up to the door instead of leaving it hidden in the bushes?" One of the men retorted angrily. "Yes, and have someone see us from the road?" sneered the leader. "Well, carry this out yourself if you think it's so light." From her hiding place, Nancy Drew watched the men as they deliberately stripped the room of everything valuable. Piece by piece they carried out the furniture, but the girl was given no opportunity to escape, for the leader of the gang remained in the room while the others made the trip to the van. "Well, I guess we have everything now," the leader muttered at last. He turned to follow his companions, who had already gone to the truck, but in the doorway paused for a last careful survey of the room. At that fateful moment there came a muffled sneeze from the closet. The robber wheeled about. Walking directly to the closet, he flung open the door and exposed poor Nancy, who was crouched in the far corner. Angrily, he jerked her out. "Spying on us, eh?" he snarled. Nancy Drew eyed the man defiantly. "I wasn't spying." "Then what are you doing in that closet?" "I came to see the caretaker." "Looking for him in a funny place, ain't you?" sneered the man. Nancy realized that she was in a desperate situation. The look on the robber's face frightened her. "I heard someone coming and I was afraid," she explained lamely. "Well, it was unhealthy business that brought you here," the man told her sharply. "What'd you hear in that closet?" Without giving her an opportunity to answer the question, he added with a scowl, "I warn you, this will be the last time you'll ever stick your nose in business that don't concern you." As Nancy saw the expression on the man's face, there was no mistaking the ugly threat. One glance assured her that she could expect no mercy. The hopelessness of her situation gave her the courage to defy him. "I didn't hear much, but I saw plenty," she cried. "You're nothing but a..." "How is this going to help her?" "You're nothing but a common thief, and if I get the chance, I'll turn you and your gang over to the police." "If you get the chance, that's good," the robber laughed mirthlessly. "I'll do with you as I did the caretaker." "The caretaker?" Nancy grasped in horror. "What have you done with him?" "You'll find out all in good time." The man held Nancy's wrists in a vice-like grip. Her efforts to free herself were of no avail. "It won't do you any good to try to get away," her captor informed her. Nancy was desperate. Suddenly, utilizing every ounce of her strength, she gave her imprisoned wrists a quick upward jerk. As the action tore her hands free, she darted for the door. With a cry of rage, the robber was after her. Almost in one long step, he overtook her, caught her roughly by the arm, and forced her against the wall. "Not much you don't," he snarled. There's actually meant to be a picture. Do I have the illustrations? Illustrations? I don't think I do. No, I don't. I'll show you. This is actually apparently the frontispiece in some editions. There you go. He's there. When the camera can't see me, it can see the book. When it can see me, it can't see the book, apparently. And you can see it's a much older style of illustration to what we're used to as being Nancy Drew. "Not much you don't," he snarled.
Nancy Drew struggled this way and that. She twisted and squirmed. She kicked and clawed, but she was powerless in the grip of the man. "Little wildcat, you won't do any more scratching when I get through with you." "Let me go," Nancy cried, struggling harder. The man half carried, half dragged her across the room. Opening the closet door, he flung her roughly inside. Nancy heard a key turn in the lock. The sliding of a bolt into place followed. It's a closet. So you have a lock on the outside of it to lock the closet shut, and you also have a bolt to lock it shut. What are you keeping in your closet, man? Not the bad guy, but the people who have this house. The sliding of a bolt into place followed. "Now you can starve for all I care," the man laughed harshly. Then the steady tramp of his heavy boots across the floor told Nancy Drew that he had left the house. Chapter 16. Left to Starve. When the sound of the footsteps had died away, Nancy Drew was overcome with panic. A feeling of desperation came over her. She realized that the robber had dared to carry out his ugly threat. He had locked her in the closet and had left her there to starve. At first, Nancy was too frightened to think logically. She beat frantically upon the door with her fists, but the heavy oak panels did not give. "Help! Help!" she screamed. At last, exhausted by her efforts to force the door open, she fell down upon the floor, a dejected, crushed little figure. "Maybe those men will come back later and let me out," she tried to encourage herself. "Surely they can't be so heartless as to leave me here to starve." But even as the thought came to her, she heard the muffled roar of a heavy truck as it passed the Topham bungalow on the way to the road. With a feeling of utter hopelessness, Nancy heard the van depart. She knew for a certainty the cruel, hardened rascals were indifferent to her plight. They had abandoned her to a horrible fate. The house was as silent as a tomb. Although Nancy had little hope that there was anyone within miles of the cottage, she again raised her voice and shouted for help. Her cries echoed through the empty house and seemed to mock her. "Oh, why didn't I have sense enough to tell Helen Corning where I was going?" she thought miserably. "She believed I was starting for home. The girls will never dream that I came here." And her father thought that she intended to remain at the camp for a week. So he's not going to send anyone to look for her, is he? No, it's not really working very well, is it at all? Right. He would not become alarmed over her absence until it was too late. Oh, if only she had never left her home in River Heights. "Someone may find my roadster at the side of the road," Nancy reasoned. "If the bad guys don't take that too." But it isn't very likely. Very few persons pass this way so late in the season. What had become of Jeff Tucker, the caretaker? Certainly she could expect no aid from that quarter. The robber had hinted that he had done away with the old man, and knowing the character of the rascals, it was impossible not to believe the worst. As the full significance of the situation dawned upon the girl, panic again took possession of her. In a desperate attempt to break down the door, she threw her weight against it again and again. She pounded upon the panels until her fingers were bruised and bleeding. At last she sank down to the floor to rest and tried to force herself to reason calmly. "I'm only wasting my strength this way. I must try to think logically. If I don't, I am lost." I would be thinking, is the door the weakest point in this space? Is there anywhere else I can get through? Is the rest of this closet made out of brick, in which case the door is the weakest point? If it's made out of timber or a plaster over timber lath, which is those little thin strips of boards, maybe I can break my way out. Is there a way to climb up and get into the ceiling? You know, thinking things through a little bit more. "I'm only wasting my strength this way. I must try to think logically. If I don't, I'm lost." Nancy Drew recalled that she had once read that it was possible to pick a lock with a hairpin. Feeling in her hair, she found a heavy wire one and began to work at the lock, but in the darkness she could not see, and she made little progress. That only works if the key has not been left in the lock. After 15 minutes, she gave the task up in disgust. It's no use, she decided miserably. I'm afraid I'll never get out. She began to think of her father, of Helen Corning and other dear friends. Would she ever see them again? As she despondently claimed Nancy, as despondency claimed Nancy, she was dangerously near to tears. Resolutely, she tried to shake off the mood. This will never do, she told herself sternly. Surely there's a way to get out of here. I must keep my head and try to think of something. After a time, as a new idea occurred to the girl, she began to rummage about in the closet, hoping that by some lucky chance she might find a tool which would help her to force the lock of the door. She searched carefully through the pockets of every garment which hung from the hooks. She groped over every inch of the floor. She found nothing of value, and the cloud of dust which was stirred up made breathing more difficult than before. The closet had become uncomfortably warm by this time. Then, unexpectedly, Nancy's head struck something hard. Quickly investigating, she discovered a narrow wooden rod suspended overhead. Evidently, it had once been used for dress and coat hangers, as it was fastened to either wall and ran the length of the closet, as opposed to just nails in the wall, which we had implied were there. If I could get that rod down, I might be able to use it to break out a panel of the door, Nancy thought hopefully. Feels strong and it's about the right size. She tugged at the rod with all her might. To her satisfaction, one side gave, another hard jerk brought the rod down on her head. To her bitter disappointment, Nancy found as she examined the rod that it was too long to use as a ram, but after a little experimentation she discovered she could press it into service as a wedge. Inserting it in the crack between the hinges, she threw all her weight against the rod. At first, the door did not budge. Archimedes did not know what he was talking about when he said the world could be moved with a lever, Nancy murmured. I'd like to see him move this door. It's not a true enough quote, girl. It's with a lever long enough is the first part that's necessary for what you're saying. As she applied steady pressure to the rod a second time, she saw that the hinges were beginning to give. Encouraged, she applied more force. It's coming, she cried. Once more she threw her weight against the rod. A hinge tore from the casing and the door sagged. It was now easy to insert the wedge, and Nancy knew that that success would soon be hers. Then, just as another hinge gave way, she was startled to hear footsteps. Someone came running into the bedroom, and a heavy body hurled itself against the door of the closet. The unexpected action stunned Nancy. Could it be that one of the robbers had heard the noise she had made and returned to make sure that she did not escape? One of the robbers who's in the truck that's already driven away, and she's been there for a while. She's been there long enough for it to get hot. They heard her. So I'm just going to put this down to fear brain. She discarded the theory as quickly as it came to her. The robbers were far too wise to tarry once their disgraceful work had been accomplished. Then, too, she had heard their moving van leave. Frantically, Nancy rattled the doorknob. "Oh, you's a caged lion this time," a rather unsteady voice remarked. "You's one of those tough robber boys, is you, where you won't do no more pilfering 'cause I done got you surrounded." "Let me out," Nancy pleaded. "I'm not a robber." The sound of a feminine voice coming from the closet nonplussed the man. "Say, robber boy, is you imitating a lady's voice to throw me off the scent? If you is, it won't do no good, 'cause I's natural-born two-legged bloodhound." Nancy thought of a way to convince him. She let go her longest and loudest feminine scream, which I will not be demonstrating for you because I am not a scream person. "That's enough, hold your siren, I'll let you out. There ain't a man in the world could make a racket like that. This way out, lady." Expectantly, Nancy waited, but the door did not open. "My lordy," she heard to her horror. I's gone and misplaced the key. Chapter 17. Jeff Tucker's story. Well, she could carry on opening it from the inside using this pole as a wedge, because she was getting there, and then he slammed it hard again, pushed it back in place again. Let's carry on. There was another long wait, and then to her relief, Nancy heard a key turn in the lock, and then a bolt shot back. Who bolts a closet unless it's used as a prison? Quickly, she pushed the closet door open and stepped out into the light. She stood face to face with Jeff Tucker, the caretaker employed by the Tophams. The robbers had led her to believe that they had harmed the old fellow, and Nancy was glad to see him well and happy, albeit a little too happy, for Jeff Tucker plainly had a bit too much to drink. Jeff still knew very well what's going on about him, but a certain alcoholic glitter in his eyes and his somewhat unsteady stance informed Nancy that he was not just as sober as the proverbial judge. She suspected that while he had been absent on his convivial celebration, the robbers had made off with the Topham fortune, for even in his condition of semi-inebriety, Jeff seemed to realise that something was amiss. He stared at Nancy, then his eyes roved about the topsy-turvy room. Say, white girl, you tell me where all this here furniture's at. Nancy smiled in spite of herself at the old caretaker's bewilderment, but try as he might, he evidently could not rationalise the situation. The most definite information I can give you, she said, is that some robbers carted it away. If you'd been here attending to your duty, it would never have happened. That's right, blame me, I ain't supposed to be no standing army. I just a plain coloured man with a wife and 7 children all dependent on me. No, mum, I ain't having no truck with them machine gun boys. Machine guns? When did that come into it? Jeff paused and passed his hand over his forehead as if he were trying to wipe away the alcoholic cobwebs that were accumulating about his perceptive faculties. Then suddenly he pointed a bony finger at Nancy and demanded, How come you here? That's a fine question for you to ask, replied Nancy indulgently. I had to read the subtitles. I thought you were cussing. It's probably because of the accent that it's written with, and I'm dropping some of the bits that are already in it. Yeah, it's a little bit weird. Let's just have a quick review of what's in there. I don't know which part of that would have been the inappropriate, but anyway, let's carry on. That's a fine question for you to ask, replied Nancy indulgently, but I don't mind telling you, I arrived just as the robbers were hauling off the last of the furniture. They locked me in the closet. I must have been there for hours. You was in that closet all that time? Jeff's voice suddenly took on a pathetic tone. You poor child. Suppose you'd have starved to death in there, or the house had burned down, or you were scared into fits, or... There now, Jeff, don't take on about what might have happened to me. I'm all right. Nancy determined to try persuasion on the old fellow in order to find out what had happened to him. Tell me, where were you last night? She suggested gently. Well, miss, it was this here way. I was out in the yard a-choring around last night and a-thinking how I wished I was someplace where I wasn't, just any place. I didn't mind where. I was just all fed up being a caretaker and taking care of this truck from morning till night. This setup. From morning till night. It ain't such an exciting life, miss, and while I's done sowed all my wild oats, I still sows a little rye now and then. Yes, Jeff, I can smell that on your breath right now. He's been drinking some rye by the sound of it. Jeff wiped the back of his hand over his mouth in an apparent effort to keep his rye-laden breath from being propagated into the atmosphere. This is quite rougher than I would have expected from a Stratemeyer Syndicate book. But this is in the early days. I think later on, this sort of aspect of it was reduced, or more finger pointing went on at the person who was involved in anything like that. "You can't blame me, miss," he protested. "He gave it to me." Who is this he? "Why, that man who drives up in the big sedan. He sees me out there and knows how lonesome and useless I feel. So he says, 'Jeff Hoppin, I know a place where.' So when I ops course, I locked up this here house and the barn and said that everything's safe." Safe? From the looks of this room, one could hardly call it that. "Oh, well, miss, it looked safe, and I felt safe too when we whizzed off in that big car. Then this white man, he says, 'Jeff, how about a little drink?' And I says, 'I don't mind, seeing it's you.' Then I had one and some more too, I guess, because after a while I didn't feel like I was riding in no automobile at all." So they were drinking and driving. "I thought that the chariot had gone and had swung low, and I was being wafted off to some place in the general direction of heaven." "Well, that was a fine thing to do, I must say," Nancy commented. "Then what happened?" "I comes to, I sees I ain't in no chariot no more, but I's in a hotel, and I's in bed, and I's feeling powerful sickish like and discouraged. Well, I gets my clothes on, and I sees my keys to the house has done been pilfered. Then I tries to recollect done what come to pass, and what done come to pass, and I get suspicious. I says to myself, 'Jeff, how come that white man so friendly? How come he give you drinks that costs $4 a pint? How come you ain't got no keys? Black boy, bestir yourself, and here I is.'" I don't know that that's how he would have spoken in real life, but there you go. That's how the author has written it for us. "Oh, yes, you're all right. You're here all right," Nancy returned severely. "And a fine mess you've made of it, too. What do you think Mrs. Topham will say when she learns?" "Well, yeah, it's his fault, but it's not just his fault. The other guy tempted him into it." Jeff rolled his eyes. "Lordy, miss, what will she say? I reckon I's done gone and discharged myself." "It would be only what you deserve, Jeff. You were unfaithful to your trust." Was kind of a victim, you know. "What do you mean, miss? Trust? I don't trust nobody no more, especially no footloose white boys a travelling round in sedans." "You don't understand. I mean, you didn't treat Mrs. Topham right in going off." "I reckon you're right, miss. Old Jeff done gone and made a fool of himself. I realise that whatever I gets I's got it a-coming." A tear rolled out of his a tear rolled out on his furrowed old cheek, and he wiped it away with his handkerchief. "There, Jeff," Nancy said consolingly. "Let's forget about what's been done and think about what we can do to straighten things out. I'll try to help you. We must report the robbery to the police right away. Is there a telephone in the house?" "No, miss, we ain't got no telephone here. We always uses the RDF." "Then we shall have to go to town as quickly as we can in my car." RFD. Use the RFD. I have no idea what that is. "Then we shall have to go to town as quickly as we can in my car. Do you suppose that you would recognise the man who enticed you away, Jeff?" "Say, would I remember him? I'd recognise that man in a bootleggers' convention. He was tall and slick-looking with a kind of gimme look in his eyes. Yes, mum, I sure would know that baby." Before leading the way to her roadster, Nancy Drew thought of the old Crowley clock again and all that it might mean in the solving of the mystery of the will. Jeff, as caretaker, would surely know whether or not it was in the bungalow before the robbery. "Tell me something, Jeff," she said. "Was there an old clock in the house, a tall, square-faced mantel clock?" So a mantel clock is a clock that sits on your mantelpiece, so it's not huge. It's not like a case clock, which is a tall one, like what we would call a grandfather clock. Give me a minute. Oh, PJ's just going to go and show you something. Show and tell. Yes. Except it's a square-faced one. We'll let him bring his one. Show you first. So this one, it talks about it being square-faced, and on the actual picture of the cover that you can see here, which you will find online if you look up The Secret of the Old Clock and type in something like original cover or first edition, you will see pictures of what the illustrator has done. This is a mantle clock.
Sadly, the inner workings of this one are not original. It's been replaced with electric.
But there you go, that's a mantle clock. So this would sit on your mantelpiece.
It's one of these.
It would sit on your mantelpiece like this, and you'd open it up and
And
wind
that
it.
is not the time,
You'd
by the
wind
way.
it through these two holes here. And it would sit there on your mantelpiece above your fireplace, and you would, anywhere in the room that you were in, you would actually be able to see what the time was.
But yes, sadly... Oh, no, I can't. I'd have to undo a screw.
No, don't
But
worry about it.
apart from the dial itself, effectively, and like the glass in front of it, unfortunately, the rest of it is
The guts have been removed.
all
Probably so
been
someone could pull
removed.
them apart and use them for steampunk decorations.
But honestly, I'm still glad that my sister gave me this.
It's a lovely
Because-
shaped clock.
It really is.
So the one that's in the story, this is a more recent one, but the one that's in the story is square. That's what it's talking
As
about, a
opposed to
square-faced
round.
clock. Yes. Hence the one that she under her arm in the picture on the cover. Thank you.
I was able to help.
Yes, you were. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm slightly sleep deprived, hence the...
Sorry, I'm slightly sleep deprived, hence the scatterbrain, he says. Where do we get to? Tell me something, Jeff, she said. Was there an old clock in the house? A tall, square-faced mantel clock. So tall being, it's a little, most, as you saw with that one, they're usually wider and shorter. Some of them were taller. Yes, miss, but all I ever done to it was dust it. I never wound it up to see if it would run.
Good news is I have coffee.
Yes. Cup of joy. Excellent. I've got this sort of coffee. I'm going to have to make myself the other sort afterwards
You've got duct
to have a
tape
little bit
coffee.
more. Yeah, I've got duct tape brand coffee. To have a little bit more of a caffeine kick.
Yep.
I've had lunch. It was a slice of cheese.
Oh, well done.
Well, I was talking to the girl.
Yeah, I was thinking that. The aforementioned sister
Yes.
who gave me that clock.
Yes, that's right. Yes, miss, but all I ever done to it was dust it. I never wound it up to see if it would run. I've got a watch of my own. Jeff punctuated his remarks by taking a large silver open-face watch from his pocket and holding it to his ear. She's done run down too. I reckon that I was in that hotel when I should have been tending to this watch. Never mind the watch, Jeff. You're sure there was a clock in the house then? Oh, I's dead rights on that, miss. There sure was. I recollects that clock just as plain as day. I wouldn't forget that clock. No, Mum, never. Why wouldn't he forget it? Why is he so emphatic about it? Nancy felt almost certain that this was the clock which contained the notebook telling of what disposal had been made of the Crowley will, and that it had been stolen by the robbers. She must recover the clock. And there was only one way. The thieves must be apprehended and the stolen goods returned. With this thought in her mind, she rushed out toward her roadster, calling Jeff to follow. I'm coming, miss, Jeff called. Just a minute. He half hobbled off behind the house out of Nancy's sight, while she sat waiting impatiently in her roadster. She started the engine and warmed it up, but Jeff still failed to return. She called to him, but there was no response. Finally, she could stand the suspense no longer. Jumping to the ground, she set off to find out what had become of the old scamp. She found Jeff leisurely performing an elaborate facial ablution at the cistern pump. He would pump his hands full of water and then, with a great spluttering noise, dash it against his face. For goodness sake, Jeff, said Nancy, provoked as she came upon him. Don't you realise I've been waiting for you? Those robbers will probably be in the next state before we even succeed in notifying the police. Excuse me, miss, but I's taken a little wash. I see you are, but can't that wait? But this here wash is important. I just wants to get good and sober before I goes into that police station, and this cold water is good for what ails me. Coax, wheedle or threaten, Nancy was unable to hurry Jeff a minute. He doesn't want to go into the police station, smelling drunk. Nancy was unable to hurry Jeff a minute, but at last he had finished, and Nancy, with a sigh of relief, loaded him into the waiting roadster. As she stepped upon the accelerator and the car moved slowly out into the highway, she wondered where the old Crowley clock was now, and whether she would ever be able to recover it from the thieves. Chapter 18, Notifying the Police. Actually, I'm just going to write a quick note to myself to check up on why the redeems are not working. Cool. It was probably fortunate that for Nancy Drew, that the traffic police were not patrolling the road. For as she opened the throttle wider and wider, her roadster responded with a surge of power that sent the car along at breathtaking speed. So she's speeding. This old bus can sure step, observed Jeff. Suppose it turns turtle. Don't worry, Jeff, it won't. I know this roadster. Nancy Drew did know the limit to which she dared to go. She guided the car skillfully, and in a short time they were entering the outskirts of Melbourne, the nearest town to the Topham bungalow. Wonder how many towns called Melbourne there are in America. I wonder if this is based off a real one. There's one in Australia. The nearest town to the Topham bungalow. Better slow down now, miss, Jeff cautioned. The marshal of this town is mighty persnickety about how folks acts. He run me in more'n once. For speeding? No, just for enjoying myself. That's why he was washing his face and sobering up. Then I suppose you can tell me where the jail is. Deed I can, miss, I sure can. Fact is, this is my favourite jail. You goes right down Central Avenue to Maple Street and turns to the left, and there you is. The roadster stopped in front of the building with a lurch, and Nancy stepped out briskly, with Jeff following at a more leisured gait. I must see an officer, Nancy announced as she entered the office. I want to report a robbery. A buzzer rang, and soon a marshal, followed by several men, entered. Nancy quickly told them all she knew about the Topham robbery, and to corroborate what she had said, she called Jeff for his version. She speaks the truth, testified Jeff, except she didn't make it strong enough. First thing they kidnaps me so I won't be around to raise no ruckus. Then they gives me some kind of a sleeping powder and parks me in a hotel. That's how he's covering it. But I comes to and goes back, and there I find this girl cooped up in a closet, just as she told you, and they wrecked Miss Topham's house and stole all the furniture. The marshal and his men listened attentively and plied Nancy with questions to clear up certain points. Have you any idea which road they took? The marshal asked her. Yes, sir, I examined the tyre tracks when the thieves had backed a truck up to the house and noticed the pattern they made in the turf. When we passed the road crossing a few miles out of town, I saw the same tracks just off to the side of the road where they had slipped off and turning their truck northward. At the speed she was going, I'm surprised she even noticed there was a turning. Can you lead the way? Yes, I'll do everything in my power to help. The marshal terminated the interview by giving curt orders to his deputies. Get your automobile started, he directed Nancy. We'll follow in the police car. Hurry, Nancy begged as she turned toward the door. Those men have nearly an hour's start on us now. So that means she's only been in the closet for an hour. Okay. Hastily, she ran to the street and sprang into the roadster. Starting the motor, she waited impatiently for the marshal and his men to appear. After a seemingly interminable wait, they came out buckling on holsters. They piled into the police car, it's inverted commas here, I don't know why, which stood at the curbing, and the marshal took the wheel. After several unsuccessful attempts, he started the motor. Jeff Tucker, who had followed the men from the office, would have inflicted his person upon the already overburdened car, but as he attempted to gain the running board, he was forced gently but firmly back upon the sidewalk. Follow me, Nancy cried out to the marshal. Shifting gears, she started off down the road. At the corner, she looked back to see that the police car was following, and caught a glimpse of Jeff Tucker, who stood gazing mournfully after the departing automobiles. At the edge of town, Nancy selected the road which she felt certain the robbers had taken. Her high-powered roadster was built for speed, and several times she was forced to slow down in order that the marshal and his men might keep her in sight. Nancy had gone perhaps 8 or 9 miles when unexpectedly she came to a fork in the road. Uncertain which branch to take, she brought the roadster to a halt. The police car pulled up alongside. "What's the matter now?" the marshal called out. "I don't know which way to go." The marshal and his deputy sprang from their automobile and began to examine the tracks in the road. Don't forget, this is a soft surface road. It's not sealed. But if a moving van had passed that way, the tyre marks had been obliterated by other vehicles. There was no clue to indicate which route the robbers had selected. "They must have taken the right-hand fork," the marshal hazarded. Nancy shook her head doubtfully. "Doesn't the left-hand road lead to Garwin?" Garwin, that's another place. Garwin. The marshal nodded. "Then it strikes me the robbers would have taken that road. It seems reasonable that they would head for a large city where they could dispose of the stolen goods." "Maybe you're right," the marshal admitted reluctantly. "I'll tell you what we'll do," Nancy proposed as she had an inspiration. "You take the right-hand road and I'll head for Garwin." "And if you should overtake those rascals, what would you do?" the marshal demanded in some amusement. "You couldn't expect to stop them single-handed." "I wouldn't try. I'd race back and give the alarm. Hurry, every minute we delay gives them just that greater advantage." Without waiting until the marshal had returned to his automobile, Nancy drew backed her car and headed down the left-hand road. The highway was smooth, and as there was a clear stretch ahead, she drove rapidly. She realized already the robbers had a big start, and that if once they reached Garwin, she could not hope to overtake them. "I'm sure I'm on the right trail," she told herself. "That other road doesn't lead anywhere in particular." After she had travelled several miles, Nancy became less confident. Although she had passed a number of side roads, she had kept to the main highway, and she realized that it would have been easy for the moving van to elude pursuit by taking any one of the branches. Still, the robbers can't know that they're being followed, she reasoned. It's likely they'll be off their guard. 15 minutes passed, and Nancy began to fear that after all she had selected the wrong road at the fork. Presently, as she noticed a man with a team of horses approaching, she determined to question him. "Have you seen a large moving van on this road?" she called out as she stopped the roadster alongside the wagon. "A truck passed me about 20 minutes ago," the farmer told her. "The big road hog tried to push me into a ditch." Highly elated at the information, Nancy thanked the farmer and drove on. "At the rate I'm going, I should overtake the robbers in a few minutes," she thought. "Oh, if only I could get my hands on the Crowley clock before the police confiscate the stolen goods." 10 minutes passed, and then another 10. As Nancy gazed anxiously down the road, she could see no sign of the moving van. The vehicle is 20 minutes ahead of you. That does not mean that you will catch up to it in 20 minutes, unless it has stopped. "I've missed them somewhere," she decided in disappointment. "There's nothing to do but go back." Nancy Drew recalled the fact that she had passed a roadhouse less than a mile back, and it occurred to her that possibly the robbers had stopped there. "I'll go back there and make inquiry," she thought. "I haven't gone by a single crossroad since I talked with that farmer, so if the robbers didn't stop at the roadhouse, I can't imagine what became of them. Maybe they're in Garwin. If they were on this road, I'm certain I would have passed them by this time." Dusk was approaching, and Nancy Drew knew that if she were ever to find the robbers, it must be within the next hour. Skillfully, she turned the roadster around in the road. A few minutes of fast driving brought her within sight of the roadhouse. The place was of disreputable appearance, and Nancy suspected that it might be a bad resort to visit. It stood back from the road a short distance and was half hidden by tall trees. The building was large and rambling, but rather old and sadly in need of paint. A sign on the gate read, "The Black Horse." Beyond the inn, Nancy caught a glimpse of a garage and a large stable. She did not enter the private driveway which led to the inn, but stopped her car at the side of the road. Before starting to walk toward the roadhouse, she hesitated. "I don't like to go in there, but there's no other way," she decided. She walked briskly up the path, glancing about in all directions for a sign of a moving van. The door of the garage was closed, as was the door of the barn, and the thought occurred to her that perhaps the robbers had parked their van inside one of the buildings. As she drew near the inn, Nancy approached cautiously. As she stepped in upon the veranda, coarse laughter reached her ears. She tiptoed to a window and peered inside. What she saw caused her to start in surprise. In a dimly lighted room, 3 men were seated around a table, obviously engaged in a drinking orgy. They were the 3 men who had robbed the Topham bungalow. Chapter 19. A risky undertaking. I must notify the marshal at once, Nancy Drew told herself as she recognized the 3 robbers. Turning away from the window, she crept noiselessly from the porch, and as soon as she was a safe distance from the inn, broke into a run. As she stepped into her roadster, a sudden thought occurred to her. Those robbers must have parked their van in the garage behind the inn. If only I could get my hands on the clock before I notify the police. Once the marshal takes charge of the stolen goods, I'll have no opportunity. Motivated by the impulse, Nancy drove on down the road a short distance, and rounding a bend came upon another side road which led into the woods directly behind the inn. A side road, but that's not a crossroad. She had to come quite a way back. So she passed this side road but said it didn't count. Yes, no logic. Stopping the roadster where it would be hidden by the trees, she got out and hurried through the timber. Before leaving the car, she had secured her flashlight, for already it was growing dark. Cautiously, she approached the inn from the rear. Reaching the garage, she found the doors closed, but investigation disclosed that they had not been locked. She opened one of the doors and looked inside. There was no sign of a truck, only a battered old Ford car. They must have parked the van in the barn, she decided. As she opened the stable door, it squeaked in an alarming fashion. Anxiously, she glanced towards the inn, but so far as she could tell, her actions were unobserved. There was no one in sight. Flinging the door wide, the girl peered hopefully into the dark interior. A low cry escaped from her lips. There in front of her stood the moving van. What a piece of luck, she exclaimed as she viewed the truck which the robbers had left in the barn. Now, if only I can find the clock. With a last cautious glance in the direction of the roadhouse, she hastily closed the barn door. Squeak again. It doesn't say that. Lest it swing in the wind and attract attention. With the doors shut, the interior of the barn was dark. There should be another door that she should be able to get out. As Nancy switched on her automobile flashlight and played it over the moving van, she was disappointed to note that it was a covered one. The rear doors were closed. Nevertheless, although she could not see inside, she was certain the truck contained the goods stolen only a few hours before from the Topham bungalow. Securing a firm grip on the door handle, she gave it a quick turn. To her surprise, the door did not open. With an exclamation of disappointment, Nancy turned her flashlight on it and for the first time noticed the keyhole. The robbers had locked the van. Oh dear, now what shall I do? She questioned frantically. I'll never be able to break the lock. Desperately, she glanced about. She dared not remain many minutes in the barn lest the robbers return and find her there, yet she could not admit defeat. Perhaps the keys were left in the ignition switch, she thought hopefully. She rushed to the front of the van and clambered into the driver's seat. An examination of the dashboard did not reveal the keys hanging from the ignition switch. The robbers must have taken the keys with them, she told herself. Nancy was discouraged. She was on the point of admitting defeat when a thought came to her. Among her acquaintances, there were a number of persons who upon occasion hid their automobile keys under the front seat. It was barely possible that the robbers had done likewise. Nancy hastily pulled up the leather seat and looked underneath. In old vehicles, it was actually an upholstered seat bottom and an upholstered seat back, and the back was fastened to a special metal frame that was a seat, and the frame was done as an enclosure like the bottom half of a biscuit tin sort of thing, but seat shaped. And then the actual seat itself the seat part of the seat sat in that. And so she's just lifted it up and she's looking under it. Storage space. Nancy hastily pulled up the leather seat and looked underneath. A ray of her flashlight illuminated a small object in one corner. Eagerly she snatched it up and saw it was a key ring. Luckily it was with me. Luck was with me once, she murmured as she ran back to the rear of the van. Sorry, too hot now. After trying several of the keys, she at last found one which would fit the lock. Turning it, she jerked open the door. As she flashed her light around inside the truck, she saw that she had made no mistake. The van contained the stolen goods, and it was loaded nearly to the top. Okay. We have another picture. This is her looking in through the back door of the van at all the stuff that's inside that she's going to have to actually work her way through to find anything. What shall I do if the clock is on the bottom? Nancy groaned as another problem occurred to her. I'll never find it. Dexterously, she swung herself up onto the load. She flashed the light about on chairs, tables, rugs, and boxes. There was no sign of the Crowley clock. Then the beam rested for a moment upon an object in a far corner, and with a low cry of delight, Nancy saw that her search had been rewarded. Protected by a blanket, an old-fashioned mantel clock rested on top of a centre table in the very front of the van, so that's just behind the cab. She scrambled laboriously over odd pieces of furniture as she tried to reach the clock. Her dress caught on something sharp and tore, but Nancy did not heed it. She snatched at the blanket and swept the clock toward her. One glance at the timepiece assured her that it fit the description Abigail Rowan had given her. It had a square face, and the top was ornamented with a crescent. Nancy was almost certain it was the Crowley clock. But as she stood staring at it, her keen ears detected the sound of voices outside the barn. The robbers were coming back. I'm lost, flashed through her mind. Clutching the blanket and the clock tightly in her arms, Nancy Drew partly crawled and partly fell over objects as she struggled to get out of the truck before it was too late. She was afraid to think what would happen to her if the robbers discovered her in the van. No! Actually, I need to see if I can get this book picture for you. I'm going to try and do that. Please bear with me for a minute. You guys talk among yourselves. Illustrations. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Illustrations. Books. Add another one. Add files. Yeah, I was going to do this before, but totally forgot about it. Sorry. This is, what did I put it under? Nancy Drew? I think I put it under Nancy Drew, because Hardy Boys have their own section, which would make sense. So we've got that one, that one, that one, and that one, I think. Oh, and that one. Open. Okay. I'm going to come back here and turn on illustrations. There it is. So this is the one where the someone was pointing and talking about clock, I guess, for some reason. I don't know why. But that one's not a square-faced clock. This is her driving into the barn where the girls lived by the river. This is her being bailed up in the cottage. Let's turn off the keyword thing for a minute. There's the carpet all rolled up and everything because they were going to remove everything from the house. And this is her looking in the back of the truck. There you go. So this is from the cover. You've got her with a clock under her arm and a little bit of a rug wrapped around it. And she's wandering through, she's sneaking away through the woods. That's very much an illustration of a girl from that period, that time period, the 1930s, who was wearing reasonably fashionable clothes, which is one of the reasons I like seeing the illustrations from this era, is just because, see, she's got that little cloche hat on. The style of the clothing that she's wearing is a lot more true to the era that book is set in, which makes a lot of sense, really. So let's carry on. I'll just turn that off for a minute. That, and turn on key, because the key one works, I know that much. One glance at the timepiece assured her that it fit the description that Abigail Rowan had given her. It had a square face, and the top was ornamented with a crescent. Nancy was almost certain it was the Crowley clock, but as she stood staring at it, her keen ears detected the sound of voices outside the barn. The robbers were coming back. Clutching the I'm lost, flashed through her mind, clutching the blanket and the clock tightly in her arms. That's why I was thinking of the illustration on the cover. Nancy Drew partly crawled and partly fell over objects as she struggled to get out of the truck before it was too late. She was afraid to think what would happen to her if the robbers discovered her in the van. Reaching the door, she leapt lightly to the floor. She could now hear heavy footsteps coming closer and closer. She slammed the truck door shut and searched wildly for the keys. Oh, what did I do with them? She thought frantically. Then she saw that they had fallen from the door to the floor and snatched them up. The ground, by the way. Hurriedly inserting the right key in the lock, she secured the doors. The deed was not accomplished a minute too soon. As Nancy wheeled about, she distinctly heard the murmur of angry voices outside. The robbers were quarrelling among themselves, and already someone was working at the fastening of the barn door. Escape was cut off. Nancy felt that she was cornered. Oh, what shall I do? She thought in despair. It's a barn. There should be something you can hide behind or under. Chapter 20. What Nancy Found. Yes, we're going to carry on. While Nancy Drew hesitated, uncertain which way to turn, her mind worked more clearly than ever before. She realised instantly that she could not hope to run to the front of the car and place the keys under the seat where she had found them. Instead of attempting the impossible, she flung them upon the floor. Then, glancing frantically about for a hiding place, she saw an empty manger. A manger is a rack that you put hay or straw in, or feed of some sort in, for animals to feed from, especially during winter. And yes, it stars in the Christmas Carol, Away in a Manger. That's what a manger was. It was a feeding trough for animals, but for loose, dry stuff. She saw an empty manger. Running to it, she scrambled inside and dropped the blanket over her head just as one of the barn doors swung open. The three men came in, closing the door after them, and as Nancy had suspected, they were the robbers. Evidently they had been drinking, for they were quarrelling among themselves over the division of spoils. Ah, shut up, the leader growled. Get in and let's be getting out of here before we have the cops down on our heads. Nancy heard him rummaging under the seat of the car. Truck. Van or truck. Say, what you do with them keys? He demanded harshly of one of the men. What do you suppose? Came the unpleasant response. I put 'em under the seat. Then come and find 'em, and don't be all day about it either. All right, get out of the way and give me a chance. As the second robber went to the truck and began a careful search for the keys, Nancy Drew crouched fearfully in her hiding place. I don't see what could have happened to them keys, the robber complained after an unsuccessful search. I put 'em right under the seat. Say, if you've lost 'em. The leader did not finish the threat, for at that moment the third robber stooped over and picked up something at his feet. Here they are on the floor. You must have put 'em in your pocket and dropped 'em out. I didn't, the other retorted. I never had them keys in my pocket. The robbers were in a quarrelsome mood and would have engaged in battle then and there had not the leader interposed. Say, cut out the comedy. We ain't got no time for a fight unless we want to land behind the bars. And if we do, it'll be your fault. You left that girl to starve. Shut up, the leader snarled. He rattled the rear door of the van and found it locked. There's no harm done this time. No one has meddled with the truck. Now get in before I give you a swift kick. After a few more angry words, The three robbers climbed into the front seat and started the engine. Due to their inebriated condition, they had overlooked the barn doors, and before the van could be backed from the building, it was necessary for one of the men to get out and fasten them back, open them up, so they're not going to swing in the way. In relief, Nancy watched the men go. The moment they were a safe distance from the barn, she scrambled out of the manger. She paused long enough to make certain that the van had taken the road to Garwin. Then, clutching the precious clock in her arms, she turned and ran. As Nancy darted into the woods, she cast an anxious glance over her shoulder, hence the book cover, but to her intense relief, she saw that she was not being followed. This one. See, she's having a look over her shoulder. There was no one to be seen. There was no one to be seen in the vicinity of the roadhouse, and the big moving van was proceeding slowly on its way toward Garwin, the occupants oblivious that their whereabouts had been discovered. I had a narrow escape that time, Nancy told herself as she ran. I hate to think of my fate if I'd been discovered. She chuckled softly at her own bravado and clutched the mantel clock more tightly in her arms. Oh well, it was worth the risk I took. It was dark in the woods, and Nancy could see only a few feet ahead of her. To her chagrin, she discovered she'd left her automobile flashlight somewhere in the barn, or in the truck. Probably in the manger. There was no time to go back after it. Confident that her sense of direction was good, she plunged through the bushes toward the place where she had parked her roadster. I thought they said she went down a lane, a back road or driveway towards it. She shouldn't be plunging through the bushes. I'm sure the clock is the right one, she thought. Now, if it only contains Josiah Crowley's notebook. In the timber, there was insufficient light for her to examine the clock, but from the hasty glance she'd given it in the barn, she was almost certain it was the timepiece Abigail Rowan had described to her. If the old woman's story was correct, she would find Josiah Crowley's notebook inside. Reaching the roadster and finding it exactly as she left it, the girl sprang inside. I don't know why they give us extra details to worry about, which have no relevance. I'll go for the police as fast as I can and send them after the robbers, she decided. The Tophams don't deserve any consideration, but I couldn't be mean enough to sit quietly by and let them lose their household goods. Then, as she was about to start the motor, her glance fell upon the Crowley clock, which she had placed on the seat beside her. She was fairly overcome with curiosity to learn what it would reveal. As she hesitated, she found it impossible to resist the temptation to investigate it immediately, even at the cost of a few minutes' delay. Let's see, hang on, how many chapters? What Nancy found is chapter 20, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chapters after that, which is probably next time. Impulsively, she opened the glass door and ran her hand around the walls. There was nothing inside. Gone, Nancy groaned. Could it be that the Tophams had discovered the notebook only to destroy it? Nancy discarded the thought as quickly as it came to mind, for she recalled the conversation she had overheard between Ada and Isabel. Excuse me. No, they were as ignorant as herself concerning the location of the will. It was more likely that Abigail Rowan had been confused in her story. Don't forget, you need to drink some water, by the way, people. After all, she'd not declared that the notebook would be found in... It was more likely that Abigail Rowan had been confused in her story. After all, she had not declared that the notebook would be found inside the clock. Nancy had made the deduction herself, which actually means that the deduction might be wrong. I was almost certain I'd find the notebook, she murmured in disappointment. It must be here somewhere. Turning the clock upside down, she gave it a hard shake. Something rattled. Hopefully, she repeated the action. Unquestionably, there was something bulky inside. It must be the notebook, Nancy thought in excitement. Unless I'm wrong, it's behind the face. How can I get it off? After a vain attempt to remove the heavy cardboard face with her fingers, she lifted the automobile seat and found a small tool with which she could pry. It then required but an instant to remove the two hands of the clock and jerk off the face. As the cardboard fell to the floor, Nancy peered hopefully inside and gave a low cry of delight. This is in the dark? Gave a low cry of delight. Remember her torches in the barn? Eureka! There at one side of the clock, attached to a hook in the top, dangled a tiny blue notebook. And that's the end of the chapter. Yes, I'm going to read one more chapter. One more. Just one more. Chapter 21, Capturing the Robbers. Eagerly, Nancy Drew tore the little notebook from the hook. The light was dim, but by holding the book directly under the dash light, this is a little light that helps you to see the dials on your dashboard in an old car, she could make out the words on the cover, "The property of Josiah Crowley." "I found it at last," she cried. Quickly turning the first few pages, she saw that they were yellowed with age. The writing was fine and cramped, and the ink had faded. These pages were crowded with business notations, but in the poor light it was next to impossible to make out the words. Nancy was excited, for she was positive that the notebook would disclose what Josiah Crowley had done with his will. Personally, I'd be putting the clock back together, sans notebook, put the cardboard face back on, put the two hands back on, and closing the glass cover for the face of the clock, so that if she arrives somewhere and the clock is seen on the seat next to her, and somebody decides that maybe it's relevant because it comes from Josiah Crowley's stuff, they can steal it and take it with them, which then becomes evidence against them, and that would give you enough time to do something with the notebook as something separate, not leaving it in pieces in the seat next to you on the car, on the seat next to you in the car. It was next to impossible to make out the words. Nancy was excited, for she was positive that the notebook would disclose what Josiah Crowley had done with his will, yet she realised that she could not hope to read through the book without a considerable loss of precious time. Yes, that too. If she were to report the whereabouts of the robbers to the police, she must not delay another instant. "I'll read the notebook later," she decided. Hurriedly replacing it on the hook inside the clock, she tacked on the face again. Then, dropping the timepiece on the seat beside her, she covered it with a blanket. The blanket, it should be. Starting the engine, she skillfully backed the roadster and headed for the main road. Reaching the highway, she cast an anxious glance in the direction the robbers had taken. There was no sign of a light on the road. The moving van had disappeared. "I must travel some now," Nancy told herself grimly. "Those robbers have at least 10 minutes start. Yes, because you stopped to look at the clock. And I may have trouble finding the marshal and his deputies." Bending low over the steering wheel, she deliberately stepped hard on the accelerator. The roadster leapt forward as though it too comprehended the need for haste. She's not heading for Garwin, she's heading back towards that intersection where the marshal was last seen. If those men reach Garwin before the marshal overtakes them, there won't be one chance in 100 of capturing them, Nancy thought. It was foolish of me to take time to look at the clock. Presently reaching the fork in the road, she selected the right-hand turn and with undiminished speed rushed on. She'd gone several miles beyond the fork when far ahead she caught sight of an automobile light. Nancy promptly reduced the speed of the car. The marshal and his deputies may have given up the search and are coming back, she reasoned. I must be careful not to pass them. As the automobile approached, Nancy slowed her roadster practically to a standstill. Then, as she recognised the police car, she brought her own automobile to a halt. As the marshal and his deputies flashed by, she cried out for them to stop. She should have hit the horn. There was a loud screeching of brakes as the police car came to an abrupt halt. Springing from the roadster, Nancy ran forward. "Quick!" she called to the marshal. "The robbers have taken the road to Garwin. If you hurry, you can overtake them. Go on, and I'll follow." Without waiting for more, the marshal and his deputies drove off at top speed. The automobile rounded a bend and was lost to view. For an instant, Nancy Drew stood looking after it. Then, springing into her roadster, she too was off. Following close behind the police car, the girls sped down the road in pursuit of the robbers. The two automobiles passed the roadhouse beyond the fork and raced toward Garwin. We should have overtaken the robbers by this time, Nancy told herself anxiously after a number of miles had been traversed and still there was no sight of the moving van. They can't have gone very far. 10 minutes passed. Then unexpectedly she caught a glimpse of a red tail light on the road far ahead. It must be the van, Nancy thought. The light doesn't appear to be moving fast enough for an automobile. Moving van as opposed to car, I think is what they're telling us. Eventually the marshal and his deputies were of the same opinion, for at that moment the police car slowed down. Don't fire unless it's necessary, the marshal ordered his men, but if they resist, pepper 'em. Gangster territory. Cautiously the police car approached. As the headlight played upon the rear of the van, Nancy saw the license plate clearly and recognised the numbers. Now that's unfair in a detective story. You're meant to tell us that you've noticed the numbers, if you're then going to pull that fact out a bit later on. Then as the van pulled over to the side of the road, the police car drove alongside. Halt, came the order. The van did not stop. Instead, it put on additional speed and crowded the police car toward the ditch. Nancy's heart was in her mouth as she watched, for it seemed certain that the marshal and his deputies were doomed. At the very edge of the road, the police car, by a sudden spurt of speed, forged ahead and averted disaster. Halt! Rang out the warning cry a second time. Halt or we'll fire! There was a sharp crack of a revolver as the robbers fired the first shot. The marshal and his deputies answered with a quick volley. One of the shots found its mark, the front tyre. I would be dropped well back by this stage because there are bullets flying and the marshal is firing back towards the van and Nancy is behind that again. And bullets travel quite a way. The van swerved in the road, and as the two side wheels. Tell me what's wrong with the logic in this sentence, children. As the two side wheels of the vehicle went off into a steep ditch, it toppled over. All of the wheels are side wheels except for the steering one. In an instant, the marshal and his men were out of the police car and had covered the three robbers. So easily had the van tipped on its side that the men were not injured, but the unexpected jar had thrown them off their guard. Take their guns, the marshal ordered. A deputy relieved the three men of their revolvers and searched their pockets for other dangerous weapons. Another deputy handcuffed them. By this time, Nancy, who had stopped her roadster at the side of the road, reached the scene. As she came running up, the marshal called to her, "Can you identify these men?" As a light was flashed upon each of the robbers in turn, Nancy nodded. There is the man who locked me up and left me to starve," she declared, pointing to the leader of the robber band. "And the stolen goods are in the van. They'll get 10 or 20 years for this," the marshal promised. "We'll hold them on several charges. You are willing to testify against them, I suppose?" "Yes, if it is necessary," Nancy promised reluctantly. "But I don't live in this county and I'm anxious to get home right away." "It seems to me you have enough evidence to convict them." "Well, if you don't want to, I guess there's no need for you to go back with us," the marshal admitted. "I'll take your address, and if your testimony should be required later, I'll get in touch with you." As Nancy told the marshal her name and address, he glanced at her with new interest. "So you're the daughter of Carson Drew. I see you're following in his footsteps, starting in young, aren't you?" Nancy laughed. "It was only an accident that took me to the Topham bungalow at the critical moment," she protested modestly. "I don't deserve any credit for the roundup." "Not many girls would have used their brains the way you did," the marshal observed. "Unless I'm mistaken, these robbers are old hands at the game. They've been plying their trade around Moon Lake for a number of seasons. The residents will be mighty grateful for what you've done. And that Mrs. Topham you spoke of, she ought to give you a liberal reward for saving her household goods." "She wouldn't give one." Nancy shook her head. "I don't want a reward." "Just the same, you've earned one," the marshal insisted. "If you're shy about blowing your own horn, I'll take it up with Mrs. Topham myself." You don't know her as well as I do, Nancy remarked. She'll not offer a reward, and even if she did, I wouldn't accept it. In fact, I must ask you not to mention my name at all to her. You don't want any credit for capturing the robbers? The Marshal gasped in astonishment. No, I would prefer that my name not be mentioned in connection with the affair. I have a particular reason for making the request. Well, you're an odd one, the Marshal remarked. You're the first person I ever saw who didn't want to take all the glory that was coming to him. You'll not mention my name? No, I'll keep it mum, the Marshal promised, and if you're anxious not to figure in the case, I guess we'll get along without your testimony. He turned toward the moving van. I'll just have a look inside and see if everything's here. Taking the keys. How would he know if everything's there? Taking the keys, which one of the deputies had turned over to him, the Marshal unlocked the rear doors of the van and carelessly glanced inside. It's all here, he announced. Nancy smiled and thought of the clock, which at that moment was hidden under a blanket in her roadster, less than a dozen yards away. Let's be getting away from here, the Marshal directed briskly. He singled out one of the deputies. You stay here and guard the stolen goods until we can send another truck after it. I'll see to it that these robbers land behind bars, and then I'll come back. Just a minute, Nancy interposed as the Marshal was about to escort the 3 robbers to the police car. I want to ask a few questions. She turned to the leader of the robbers. It was you who stole the keys from Jeff Tucker after getting him drunk, wasn't it? What if I did? The robber growled. I wish I'd finished him. Unceremoniously, the 3 prisoners were crowded into the police car. One of the deputies took the steering wheel and another stood on the running board, covering the robbers with his revolver. There was no room left for the Marshal. Are you going back through town? He asked Nancy. Yes, it's right on my way to River Heights, she responded, without a thought as to the purpose of the question. Then, if you don't mind, I'll ride back with you. There isn't room in the police car. Why, of course, Nancy stammered. At once she thought of the clock which she had left on the seat of the roadster. What if the Marshal should discover it? Even as the thought came to her, the Marshal started toward the roadster. And I'm going to stop right there and leave us anticipating what's going to happen next, because that's the end of the chapter. The next chapter is called 22. Is that exciting? Actually, no, it's called What the Notebook Revealed. And I'm going to call it quits there for today. Yay, that was a nice way to catch up with having been off sick for the last 2 streamed sessions. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here and spending time with me. It's been lovely catching up with you again. I hope you're all well. I know I have some work to do with my redeems and stuff to get them all going again, but we'll get there. Please look after yourselves. Stay hydrated. Be kind to your brain and your body.